I'm Dr. Renaud, and this video is called Summarizing Data. In this video, we'll be learning how to use distinct and group by to summarize data, and the aggregate functions count, sum, min, max, and AVG or average to do calculations across the summarization of data. The first thing I'd like to introduce is distinct. And the word distinct goes after the select in the select statement. What it tells SQL to do is to return distinct rows. So if you have multiple rows that are duplicates, you have maybe a customer name that appears multiple times, or there's other kind of duplicate data in the SQL or duplicate rows in the SQL, only one distinct row will happen at a time. It's not really summarizing data, but it's hiding the duplicate rows, and it comes in real handy when you're trying to minimize the data and to come up with simple little reports and things. We're using the world database that we used in the other previous demonstrations, and here I'm selecting the distinct continents from the country table. Remember, the country table has all of the countries in the world, but it's now just showing us what continents exist out of that list, kind of giving us a nice summary of the continents from the country table. The aggregate functions are used to aggregate columns into single values. For instance, the count aggregate function will count rows or count non-null column values. The sum aggregate function will sum a column of numeric values into a single value. The min function will return the minimum value of either a string or a numeric column. The max function returns the maximum value of either a string or numeric column. And the AVG function will return the mean or average of a numerical column. Let's see what that looks like in the next slide. For example, what if we wanted to know how many countries there are in the database, and what is the total land area of the world in square kilometers? Or what is the average size of a country in square kilometers? Well, you can see the select statement, select count star, which counts the number of rows as number of countries. So we renamed it so that it would look nice in our select results. Sum surface area would return the summation of all the surface areas of all the countries as total surface area, and AVG surface area as average size will return the average surface area. So we're going to get one row with three numbers: number of countries, total surface area, and average surface area. Let's see what that looks like. Here you can see the aggregate functions at work as it returned 239 rows as one row with three values. Here's a second example of an aggregate function being used. For instance, how many countries are there in the Asian continent? And you can see that we select count code. Code is the country code, or the primary key, from country, where continent equals Asia. Let's see what that looks like in the next slide. And you can see there are 51 countries in Asia in this database that we're using. If we need to group data, we use the group by clause. It usually follows the where clause, but comes before the order by clause in your select statement. The group by data, or the group by clause, you can specify one or more items to group data by. If any of those columns change, it creates a subtotal or a group break, and then you can use the aggregate functions to actually calculate various things about those groups. For instance, here is our first select with a group by. Select continent with count star from country, but group by continent. So it's going to give us the continent name in the first column and the count of the countries within each of the continents in the second column. And it's going to group it by continent name. Now, Don't use a column in the select statement up in the display part that isn't in the group by list of columns unless you're using an aggregate function, or you will get an error, and you'll probably see that as you experiment. Here's the result of that group by, where we group the countries by continent and count the number of rows within each continent, and you can see that in South America there are 14 countries, North America 37. You get the idea. Kind of cool, right? As I said earlier, you can group data by multiple columns. For instance, maybe you wanted, here in our example, you can, here we're going to sort by continent and then by region within each continent. The first column defined will be the group. The second column will be the subgroup. The third column will be the subgroup. So take a look at that statement and let's execute it on the next slide. Now this result set was too large to show all of the 25 rows on the single slide, but you can see that Asia is broken up into 4 areas, Europe is broken up into multiple areas, and you can see the country count by continent and then region within continent. The world database that was used during this example is available at MySQL, and the download URL is here on this slide. I would like to thank you for watching this video and remind you that this presentation is copyright 2019 by James M. Renault, PhD. You can contact me at jrenault@shawnee.edu, and this work is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share Alike 4.0 International License.